everyone. This is the Flow State Podcast. I'm Stuart P. Turner, and I'm joined by, once again, Ashton Tuckerman of 22. Hello, how are you?
Hello, very well, thank you. Sorry, I just keep coming back.
It's a pleasure to have you back, Ashton. Actually, you're my favourite of all the guests, which obviously I say to everyone when they come on.
Obviously.
I love it.
We're all favourites.
Yeah, exactly. There's no favourites. Everyone's a favourite. That's the way to do it, right? How have you been finding 26 so far, Ashton? Before we get on to the subject of today's conversation.
Yes, I blinked and it was April, and now it's the 9th of April. Whoa, it was just the first. What has happened? 2026. It's been great. So I guess from our point of view, and we can probably unpack this a little bit, I've been speaking to a lot of people in the industry, and they're either seeing agencies grow and do really well or shut up shop. That seems to be the trend that's happening out there. And thankfully, we are in the growth section of that conversation. So it's been a wild start to the year. We came in hot, new clients, new projects. Yeah, it's been busy, go. So no complaints here. That's the better problem to have than the opposite.
Yeah, definitely. Look, that's really positive. Like, I'm glad to hear that that's the case, because I think I don't know if we mentioned this last year, but I know from a few conversations there was a lot of consolidation going on, like in the service industry, like particularly in agencies. Like, I know a few of my other friends who are still in some of the bigger ones were saying there's the usual sort of reorg, acquisition, game going on, but it seemed to have stepped up. So glad to hear that you guys are doing well.
Yeah, definitely. I think in the bigger organizations, they're probably feeling it a lot more. And that's probably also something that I'm seeing just businesses generally is, if you are keeping it lean and mean, then you're probably in a good spot. But it is any business where there are, multiple layers and there's any kind of inclination to trim and reorder and replace with technology, then that is what is happening.
Yeah, and look, I know that was the subject of much debate last year as well. The AI replacement wave, which I think we're still seeing the impact of from my conversations this year. But look, let's not be depressed after such a positive start. So I think let's get into it for today. So today we wanted to talk about obviously the Content Summit, which has just happened up around your way in lovely Brisbane, and then just get into talking about something we touched on last year, the Chief Dissent Officer role, which I'm pretty excited about discussing. So look, let's talk content. So just by way of brief context before we get into your thoughts on the event itself, like obviously from our conversations last year on this podcast and in the industry as a whole, content has been under assault from various different sides, both creatively, the written word, and in various other ways due to our friends, the AI companies. Now, exactly, yeah, the completely uncreative, let's just recreate stuff robots. So look, I guess my first question is, at the event, like, did you feel like that was the sort of vibe there? Are people worried, like, or what was the sort of general, feeling based on now 2-ish years of sort of fighting off AI can do it talk?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I guess context for anyone who's not aware of Content Summit Australia, it is the
That might be useful to explain what it is. Yeah, sorry.
I'll introduce it. I don't work for them, I promise. No, it's my friends at the Content Division. It is their conference that they created, I think, 4 or 5 years ago. I don't want to misspeak. I think this was the 4th iteration. Gosh, it's gone so quickly. It's now 2 days at the Powerhouse. Incredible. So an all-in summit for content creatives, marketers, strategists, brand managers, PR and comms professionals, all things content. So like you say, written word, visual, all the things, content that we consume. Look, the conference itself was incredible. I bought the ticket because I had a big sense of FOMO. I hadn't been for the last 2 years. I was traveling, then I was studying. And so I hadn't been for a few years. And so many of my favorite people were there, either just as attendees or as speakers. So I was like, I want to go too.
Awesome.
Can I come too?
It's good to go and support, the friends in the industry, right? Get down there.
I just really felt like I would have missed out had I not gone. And having gone, that I absolutely would have felt like I missed out.
Awesome.
The speakers, incredible. I walked away knowing so much more and with things that I brought into client conversations literally the next day. So
that's cool.
Sit in a new client chat the next day and go, oh, I've just learned about this. I'm really keen to try this for you. So very, very cool. But to circle back to the point, the question that you asked me, the AI of it all, what was the sentiment? Look, I think for the first time in over a year, I was so relieved to go to a conference and not feel like it was how to use AI and you should be using AI and is AI going to replace us? Like that really wasn't the tone. The tone was very much around how are we working with things? I think because it's kind of settled now, right? Like we're working with the tools. How are we using them? Where should we be using them? Where shouldn't we be using them? So a lot more practical. And I guess that the fear maybe and the negativity had sort of mellowed, and it was very much more, now that this is the new normal, what are we doing about it? So it felt very neutral to positive and very practical and very much around, this is what we're doing, this is what we should be thinking about, and a lot more human focused, just so much human focused. That was kind of the resounding theme of it all, which was very, very nice after so many AI heavy conferences.
Yeah, that's really good to hear actually, because I think going back to what you were saying, I feel like the sign of a good event is if you've taken away things that you could put into practice straight away. That's like really a really reassuring sign that the content has been good and not just purely airy-fairy theoretical stuff, which is awesome to hear. And look, I think your point around things coming back around to let's do human stuff that we're good at, I'm sort of reassured to hear that that's happening there as well, because it seems like you're in the same space. I'm just pretty bored of the whole AI for AI's sake discussions at this point, and you obviously have to power through them because it happens every time something new and exciting occurs in the digital industry, but it does feel like the hype wave is somewhat dying down a little bit, or whatever that.
I think so. We're coming to the tail end of it. That's sort of what it feels like. It's like we've, that peak. It's like I feel like we're kind of here. It's like we've come over the peak and we're going, yep, we've got the tools. There's a lot out there. We've used them. We've got some use cases. We know the good. We know the bad. Here's what we're doing with that.
Yeah, that's definitely good to hear, and like it's a big theme for us. Not just me and you, but like my business partner in the US and I talk about this a lot, where we're building a tool that we're bringing out to market this year, but like obviously it has an AI component because you have to.
Yeah, everything has to, and businesses want to see that as well. Like your clients want to see, they want to know that you're maximizing the usage of the tools that are at your disposal. The same thing probably happened 15, 20 years ago, where it's like, are you using Adobe tools? It's like,
exactly,
are you using Google Suite? Do you use Google Drive? Like those, I'm sure the same thing just keeps happening on repeat. Are you doing things on mobile?
I feel like it does. I think it's, what's it? There's some sort of phrase about history not repeating, but echoing or something.
That's all it does. That's all humanity does.
Remember, but can't now.
We just repeat ourselves.
Yeah, and look, I think that speaks to the essential humanness of everything, right? Because like our whole focus is like exactly that. It's like the talking a lot about being in the intelligence era instead of the data era now, but like that's where AI is really useful, right? Because we've just we're inundated with useless information, so we now need other tools to try and extract the useful stuff and then work out what to actually do with it all, which without getting too off topic, I feel like is very relevant to content, just because it's so easy to churn out very low bar, low value, low effort stuff now. So the really valuable time is now spent on the human elements of that, right? Like the actual critical thinking pieces, which we will obviously come on to as we progress. So look, I think that's reassuring to hear, and obviously if you haven't heard of it, the Content Summit actually sounds awesome. I was a bit gutted that I couldn't make it this year, but duty called, unfortunately, which is, less exciting but essential. So digging into it, Ashton, let's. I've got a few bits that I just wanted to talk about specifically from some of the talks there. And obviously, if there's anything from the ground that you picked up that you want to chat about, then throw it in there. But one of the first ones I found interesting, I don't know if you saw this one or not, was Eugene Healy's talk on brands needing to operate as decentralized units rather than top-down hierarchies. Now, I'm not sure I actually agree with that, because that feels like a potential road to every brand marketer's nightmare of everything happening horribly in, off-brand nightmarish ways. Like, was that the point of that talk? Like, did you see this one, and what do you think about that?
I did, yeah, absolutely. So Eugene was the first speaker on day one. Shout out to Eugene. We did meet. Great dude, great brain, just, great presenter, all around greatness. So, and Eugene's session was a lot of people's highlights, especially his delivery, but the content that he presented was super interesting. So yeah, it was very, I totally get your perspective of like, oh no, it feels like, just letting the dog off the leash and like, oh, come back. Like, how do we do this? But the way that it was presented made a lot of sense. So I think the first thing that Eugene really spoke about was the fact that the rate of content creation has outpaced the amount that we can approve and the speed of approvals, right? We're just creating so much and the machines need us to create so much. The old approvals method of sending it up the chain and getting all this feedback and then it's sort of coming back down it slows everything down and it puts you behind as a brand. So that's one of the pieces. The second piece was definitely around creators. So working with creators and the fact that when you do that, you are borrowing their perspective, their voice, their audience, their trust, their relationships, and you actually need to let them go and do that. You can't give them the script and go and say my brand messages for me. So it just doesn't work. And I think we've all experienced that inauthentic content creator space. So what Eugene presented was this awesome graphic of a bit of a galaxy. So your brand at the center and all of these little moons, planets kind of rotating around it. And imagine that yes, very, very much. Thanks. Shout out to Artemis team who are slingshotting around the moon as we speak. So it was really interesting, but imagine all of those little planets, moons hovering, circulating around your brand right in the heart of the galaxy. Those are all things like PR, SEO, creators, like affiliates, like all of these things, right? And some of them are closer to your brand and some of them are further away from your brand, but they're sort of all moving around and, it was a very compelling thing to see. So the essence of it was this idea of the guardianship of your brand instead of that high level of control. And if you are still trying to have that high level of control over your brand, it's strangling it and it will ultimately kill it. So I think it is getting comfortable with kind of letting your audience and letting all of these people co-create your brand and that is outside your control. And that's the way it's always been. Your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room and you can influence that, but you can't control that. So the great analogy that Eugene used was it's gone from a master-slave relationship. I'm the master, you're my brand, I tell you what to do and I control you, to a parent-teenager relationship where you can't, you would relate to this. So, you can't control a teenager, you can influence them. You should be their greatest point of influence, but at the end of the day, they've got free will and they're going to do what they do. So I think that's a really good way to look at your brand. Is gone are the days they're not a baby anymore. Gone are the days where you can control your brand, but you can influence it, and being okay with, co-creation and public perception and all of the different elements kind of in the galaxy and how close and how far they are from your brand. So that's my quick little summary of Eugene's keynote.
Yeah, right. No, that sounds. I get where he's coming from there. I think that does sound pretty interesting, and like, I suppose it speaks to the, there's always been a classic tension with most brands, right? That's probably more prevalent now, just because we can all communicate so much more. That isn't exactly that space, right? It's not just companies would love to tell you that it's just what they say it is, but in effect, exactly as you and Eugene were saying, like our experience of that brand is often what shapes it more so than the the things that we're told that it is, especially for like, non-essential stuff. So yeah, that's quite an interesting perspective.
That is what your brand is. It's how your audience perceives your brand. That's what it is. And you can be like, no, we're this. And it's like, yeah, but if they don't perceive it that way, then that's not what your brand is. So
exactly, yeah.
Really, really interesting. And I felt that tension as well of, I think from a classic brand and content marketer's perspective, you want to be like, it's not on brand. You're kind of like, it's it's not on brand. And I think you need to be a little bit more open to what is on brand and what is off brand, and what you can, circle of control, circle of influence, that old school kind of mentality.
Well, look, I mean, this touches on so many other aspects of sort of branding and the conceptual nature of a brand that, like, we could probably talk forever about it. But I think the pertinent points that you and I have discussed previously, and I think that will be top of everyone's mind at the moment, are exactly that. There's this sort of, like what the brand conceptually actually is, like, is easy, right? Like if you stand for something, that should be very clear to everyone, and that's not something that needs to be policed. It's just something that everyone needs to have a handle on and should understand. Whereas the mechanical parts of maintaining brand quality, like, it's never really been easier to do that now, right? And like, I think that's the reason that I mentioned that is I talk to a lot of people about speed to market at the moment, because of all the reasons you just said. Like, you just need to get stuff out, unfortunately. And like that was the case like 15, 20 years ago or whatever, when I first started working on the internet, and it's even more the case now.
That's right. We just don't have those lead times of like, let's go and do this big TVC, and that's our hero asset, and that's the whole thing. It's like, no, like, we got to, maybe we'll still do that. It's like, we've got to cut the socials, we've got to do this, we've got to engage creators. And I think it's interesting. It's almost like all brands and all businesses have to now adopt that startup mentality of MVP, done is better than perfect. And you do give it some polish and perfection along the way, but you just got to get in there. And we were just talking before this, obviously, about us at 22 and how we're throwing our hat in the ring for podcasting now as well. And look, is the first episode perfect? Absolutely not. Like, it is. I listened to it and I was like, oh dear God, it's, and I sometimes think that's, no, it's not that bad, but it is the done is better than perfect. It's out there now. We kept saying, and we kept kicking the can down the road, and we're like, no, we'll do it. That's cool, but it's not done until it's out there. So I think it is becoming comfortable with a little bit of grunge, just get it out, just punky thoughts, DIY. Let's just kind of get it out there, and we'll refine it as we go. And there's a limit of, that tolerance for risk. How grungy are we willing to go with this? Every brand is obviously different with that as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, actually, because the and dealing with a lot of like big corporates historically, you sort of rub up against this quite a lot, where like they do have the ironclad controls over who does what and who says what, and like the brand police who are there. But it just dealing with a lot of people in sales over the years, it just ends up being a real frustration and drag on your ability to actually do the stuff that makes you money, like, which is essentially why the company's there in the first place. So like, if you can't get stuff out fast enough, then what's the point of the brand in the first place? Like, it's just,
you're leaving money on the table then as well. And surely everyone in the big companies speak to the bottom line. It's like, if you're not doing this, then you're missing out. So there was another talk from Keshni Kemp, who did, she spearheaded the Woolies TikTok strategy when she was at Woolworths. So that was really interesting of, if a brand like Woolworths can embrace TikTok and have all of their stores creating content, which sounds a bit rogue, right? You're like, oh my God, like the risk in that, but with really good guardrails and balancing that. Yeah, but if we want Gen Z shoppers, like if we want young people to engage with Woolworths and come and buy from our stores, we need to be in front of them, and that's how you do it. So I think there's great examples of big companies being willing to kind of enter these playgrounds and do it in ways that, like I say, that they're comfortable with that level of risk. And there's still guardrails in place where if something is like way off brand or just like dangerous or really should be out there, that they can rein that in and they can control it before it gets out there.
Yeah, look, I think that's the way forward. And like, funny you should mention Woolies as an example, because I'm pretty sure it was them who demonstrated quite perfectly a couple of years ago now how letting out your senior team is like typically is a higher risk than like letting the people on the ground talk about the brand. From like, I don't know if you remember the CEO getting caught blindsided by a shopper who was like, "Why is everything so expensive?" or something, and she was just like, We value your feedback, like talking like some sort of weird
like
robot.
A robot.
You're like,
that's right.
You're like,
she's
right there, just say something normal. Yeah.
Just be a human.
So yeah, that was, I mean, they like just keep her wherever she normally is, in whatever office she's in. Never let her out again. But yeah, look, I'm just never been a huge fan of the whole like having a brand up on, in some sort of weird ivory tower, because I think it just encourages a lot of what could be described as brand wank type thinking that doesn't survive contact with the real world. And then you're back exactly where you started, and being like, no, our brand's this, we stand for these things, and people are like, no you don't, you guys suck. That's,
and I'm sure we're all sick of hearing the word like authenticity, but it's
we
are in the era of people want authentic connections with the brands that they deal with for one reason or another. They want to feel a values alignment, sustainability, fun, ethos, luxury, whatever it is. It's like and that's never changed. Like I think we've always wanted a connection to the brands that we buy from. It's a value exchange, right? It's like I'm giving you my money or my data or whatever. It's like I want to be getting something back from you, whatever that is. So I don't think that's a new thing. I think that we've just slapped a label on it and we call it like, we want authentic connections with our brands. So yeah, it's not an opt-in anymore for brands. You actually need to be, if you want to have a competitive brand in the market, if you want to maintain success or grow, then that's literally what you have to do.
I think so. And on the B2B side, in the areas that we work in, like I think that's where a lot of businesses struggle quite a bit, to be perfectly honest, because they're just trapped in these sort of inflexible positions because they're so risk averse. Like, because obviously we deal with a lot of like big technology brands and a lot of people in financial services, which obviously you don't necessarily want financial services moving crazy fast. But then you look at like the rise of neobanks a few years ago, whose position literally was like, we're just going to challenge all the stuff that we know everybody hates about the existing banking system, and we're going to do it better. And that's why they're all so popular now, because they're like, they're cheaper, they're better, it's easier, you can talk to people quickly. Like, it's not, I think it just demonstrates that, sort of, what's the word I'm looking for here? That sort of embedded thinking, like, is not, just because it's always worked doesn't mean you should carry on doing that, right? Like,
that's a great segue to, quotable moment from Henri McHugh from Specsavers ANZ. We all know Specsavers should have gone to Specsavers. I think he said 23 years of should have gone to Specsavers this year. Like 23 years of that platform. Crazy. But his line was, just because you work in a boring industry, it doesn't mean you have to be boring. I'm misquoting a tiny bit, but it's basically that. It's like, we're talking optometry. Nobody before Specsavers was really having fun with getting your eyes checked, like macular degeneration or anything.
Can't see, is it? Like eyes broken. Yeah, great.
Yeah. So it was all very logical, rational messaging. And Henri's, his talk, which is another standout, was very much around how in his industry, and a lot of these industries we're talking about, sort of B2B, very sort of static, stoic sort of industries, the default is salesmanship, very rational, bringing it back to selling, all that, Specsavers has won on showmanship. And it was really interesting. And I don't think you can just be a brand, do a complete 180 and go, we're fun now. Like, that's also very inauthentic. But when you say financial services, there's some really great examples. I mean, Upbank was one of the first ones to do it. They're great. But even Bank West, with how they've been sort of going creatively with Just Enough Bank, I think it's quite interesting. Just your creative positioning, when realistically you're all sort of offering the same thing. Optometrists, banks, like, you might have different interest rates, you might have different, perks and whatever, or like loyalty programs. The reality is you are all offering the same thing. So what would make somebody choose you over someone else? Like, it probably is the way that they feel about your brand at the end of the day.
I think so. And look, like you say, in those categories, like, you're just stuck you sort of have to do it. It's a pain in the ass to change, so they can kind of lean on the whole, like, well, if you're in for more than like 2 services, you're essentially stuck potentially with the one you've got. So it is those things that make a difference. And like, I definitely think some are better at tapping into that than some others. But like you say, you can't just suddenly turn around and be like, oh yeah, we're a hilarious,
we're a fun bank now.
super fun brand now. Yeah,
I think Jaguar was the lesson in that, where their brand identity was one way, and then they're like, all the colors of the rainbow. We're United Colors of Benetton now, and everyone was like, whoa, that might be a little bit too much. So rein it back in. But just, you brought something to my mind when we were sort of talking about rational messaging as well. I had this chat so I've been doing a little bit of consulting with somebody who is launching a startup, and it is not a financial services startup, but it is sort of financial services adjacent. There's money involved. So he was sort of telling me, we both came to the same realization, where I was thinking about his business and what he's trying to start. And there's a great human reason why he has started this business. There's a beautiful story behind it. And it actually speaks to an individual story that many people will connect with and go, yes, I've experienced this. Absolutely. And when I was thinking about that and how he started positioning, I was like, oh, we've gone back to really rational messaging around, save this money, do this thing. And coincidentally, he had come to the same realization. So we met up last week, and we both had the same takeaway of, I think we've gotten too far away from the human story. That is what customers, investors, partners, they will actually connect to the human story, not the rational messaging.
Totally.
And I realized when you're using an LLM, ChatGPT, Claude, whatever it is, I don't know if this happens for you, keen to get your thoughts on it, Stu, but when you ask it, help me write this post, come up with some messaging around this is what I want to do, its default is always rational. And maybe unless you prompt and you're like, I want this to be emotional, I want this to be human. AI's default is rational messaging. And so I find this when I'm writing emails, Gmail's suggestions always strip away my personality. I'll say, I'll have a peek at this. And it says stuff like, I'll review this. I'm like, no, I don't want you to dull my sparkle. I don't want you to take it. They take it.
Stop making me a robot.
It strips out all of the showmanship, right? So that's the trap.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I and the sort of people in our team spend a lot of time dealing with this, because through FlowState, we've written for a lot of people, and we had to spend ages writing specific, like, very explicit brand voice instructions and briefs for everybody that we work with to address that. And even doing that, like, you still get the unless you explicitly give it, like, sort of gold standards of, this is what, a post as me, or how I sound or whatever. I've literally had to go through and be like, do say this, don't say this. Here's an example of something that I'm happy with to, as an email. Here's an example of something that I'm happy with as a post, whatever. So it's taken ages. And even now, like, I use Claude mainly for this stuff. It just like needs constant reminding of, like, even when you're like, saving skills and building like agents or whatever, like, there's just
got
a
the
constant,
artifacts,
like,
it's got the instructions, but
Yeah,
100%.
it's painful, and I'm still
That's
not very happy with
interesting.
it. I just I
That's
hate the
interesting
way
that you're
that it
finding the
injects
same
its
thing.
little Americanisms everywhere. I mean, like, I forget a phrase it used even when I was putting the podcast structure together today, because we've got the rest of the just flow state bit of this series is all around our like buyer group intelligence playbook, and then I was like, oh, Ashton's been to this event, you know, what sort of talks stood out from there? Because obviously I didn't go, sadly, as I mentioned at the start. But then it was like, oh, one of the phrases it had written, I asked it to check my talking points, and then it rewrote them as if I was saying them and was like, Ashton feels this, blah, blah, blah. I was like, I'm not sure she does, but let's stick with that for the moment. And then it was like, why did you say to her? Yeah, like, I really want to push this button about this like topic. And I was like, have you suddenly mistaken me for some sort of American robot? Like, why are you trying to write like I talk? I was like, stop doing that. Just check my talking points. So
yeah, we've spoken about this for a while around, you know, AI is a sea of averages. It takes everything that it knows and it flattens it out, and I'm really feeling it at the moment. Like everything that I'm like, painful. You know, however I'm using it, you know, help me polish this, help me, you know, tone. It's usually like, I've written all of this, help me get it to this. It's just, it flattens it. I was like, you've taken my whole personality, even though you know my personality. I've given you the instructions. I've given you all the examples of the posts for me that have gone well and how I like to write and how I like to sound. But it's like, you want to overwrite that. So it's a good lesson for brands as well. This whole like, can't AI do it? It's like, yeah, it'll do it, but it'll be basic. It's like, it's not going to be not going to be great. If you're okay with just getting something out the door for whatever reason, sure, why not? But surely we all want to stand out and be unique and be interesting and be creative. So, you know, AI is an assistant, but that is how it starts and stops.
Yeah, look, totally. Yeah. And I think that's where I see a lot of people making mistakes here just on, you know, chasing efficiency instead of exactly to your point, like trying to actually improve things. And like, you know, just like rebuilt the Flow State website at the end of last year and like reposition, because we're back into sort of the strategic space again now and just moving away from sort of executional stuff. But, you know, to get the website out, I was like, look, obviously Flow State itself has a brand voice that's sort of, you know, just has to sound a certain way and has some loose guidelines around it, doesn't it? You know, I'm not as pedantic with that as I am with my own stuff when I'm trying to get it to help me to do things. But even that was a challenge, just to be like, you know, get it to sort of a reasonable degree where I'm like, look, it's just, you know, the website's the shop window. Like, we're a consultative business. It doesn't need to like sell stuff or convert people or whatever. So there's no real specific objectives to drive people around, apart from like, you know, I need to introduce these concepts. We need to explain how we work. And that's where I think AI really struggles, because it doesn't, you know, to jump ahead to what we're going to talk about, it doesn't like critically assess things in that, you know, to your point, that sort of more emotive human connection way. Like, it's fine if you give it an e-commerce website and like, you know, give me 20 points I can check to improve the conversion through the site.
Salesmanship
totally
and rational messaging. It's great at that, but that's not what sticks through. But yes, the interrogation and the disagreeing, that's the missing part, right? It's like, why is the robots don't like to disagree with us? Not at the moment anyway.
I find I mean, again, without jumping ahead to our next topic of conversation, like, I've spent a lot of my time disagreeing with what is produced for me by AI tools, and then getting their weird sycophantic responses, being like, oh no, you're totally right, Stu. I shouldn't have said that. I should have said this.
Sorry.
I'm just like, this is like sick, this relationship that's developing here. So just try to stay away from all of that.
I agree. I'm really for it. Yeah, the like, oh yeah, you're absolutely right. It's like, I worry that people, you know, oh God, we're in that generation now, but it's like, I worry about younger people coming through into the industry, maybe not having been challenged or not having been disagreed with. So that's kind of the little part where right now I'm like, oh, what is the downstream effect of, you know, AI kind of just pumping up our tires constantly and telling us that we're right and that we're great and that we're special.
And that's it, right? I mean, if you look at like, I don't know, this very off topic, but I don't know if you watch the, you know, the Louis Theroux Manosphere documentary, but like, you look at the deluded morons that are on there, like who must have known surely who Louis Theroux is, and must have known the nature of the shows that he makes, and yet still went on there and were like, "Yeah, no, we're all like awesome, and the stuff we think's like totally great." And you're like, I just couldn't even sit through it without sort of railing against like just the mad cognitive dissonance that was going on there. So I can't say if they were like half taking the piss or like.
Watched it. I love Louis.
I probably wouldn't.
I've always loved his documentaries and content, but I'm like, I'm not. This is not for me.
I'm not entirely sure he was, because I love him as well, but I don't even know if he was necessarily the right person for the job there, to be honest. Because like it's just, like pointing out how stupid these people are and how inconsistent their beliefs are is easy. Like you don't need someone of Louis Theroux's sort of journalistic weight for that, like you just need to look at them for more than 5 minutes. But like, I don't know. Like, we'll leave that for another time. It's a painful watch, is all I'll say, for all the reasons you can imagine. However, loosely coming back around to content and the themes of content, there were two other points from two other talks that I wanted to get your thoughts on, Ashton. So, one was content getting attention, not converting. Is that an issue? I mean, I can see how it could be an issue based on what we were talking about. And the second one, back to your point, was on curation over creation and just creating distinctiveness instead of chasing volume. Now, those two things to me are quite closely interlinked because you have to, unfortunately, have a certain sort of volume and I would say cadence of content in a lot of digital channels to even, be in the game. Like if you just don't produce enough, no one's going to find you. And distinctiveness is an ironic one, I think, because a lot of social media channels don't really reward distinctiveness. What they reward is everybody jumping on whatever trend they think is going to make them the most ad money. So what are your thoughts on those two sort of dichotomies, if you like? And is that something that you see in your own, campaigns and programs, or are they is that wildly inaccurate?
It's interesting. I mean, and there were some other, so I didn't go to those particular talks. There were multiple sessions on at once, but
can't do everything, can you?
Actually, some like disagree. We love the dissent. There was the opposite side of this as well, around, differentiation doesn't actually cut through as much as patterns. So that consistency. And I think that kind of plays into volume. And we know that on platforms like TikTok, where they're like, if you post every day, you will see the rewards, right? And even LinkedIn is a little bit like that. If you post once a month on LinkedIn, it's probably not going to do you that much good. Like it's probably more about consistency. I think maybe it's an everyday thing on some platforms, maybe not, but fortunately or unfortunately, volume is a really big factor, but not just volume, not just pumping out, shite. Basically, it is. I would say consistency at quality, and that quality doesn't have to be like polished perfection. Like lo-fi is fine, but consistency and quality, and the platforms are, I think, rewarding you for having a consistent presence in market, which has always been the thing, right? It's like just if you kind of turn the tap on and off, it's going to go busy, leads, success, off. And then busy, lead, success, off. So you're always going to be rewarded for a constant presence in market. And I think that's just what is happening on social channels. And the idea of, getting attention but not converting, my question there would be, is the content designed to convert? Like that's not all content is converting content. And it can't be. It can't, classic old school marketing funnel, right? You can't just be playing at the pointy end of the funnel. You have to have the whole, and the customer journey might be different. I think there's like a multiple funnels example now. It's like we're going through all the funnels and it's like a water park and it's crazy like that. But at the same time, it's like you want to get to know a brand or a product or a service, and it is the repetition of new and interesting stuff until the point where you go, yep, I'm ready now. Like it is meeting people where they are. So that's probably my question. Because I didn't go to that particular session, it would be, if you're just getting attention, not converting, I would ask, do you have conversion driving content out there? Is it the right platform for, maybe people aren't converting on, on your TikTok page? Is that what you want them to do? Can you be capturing them and nurturing them elsewhere and converting them elsewhere? It's not a kind of one size fits all.
I totally agree, and I think with one foot on either side of the fences here, one in consumer and one in business. I think on the consumer side, like, this was the sort of essential, fallacy of the data era, if you want to think about it this way. It's like measuring everything just became a massive nightmare crutch for people to justify various things, some of which worked and some of which didn't. And like, not all metrics are useful. Like, just because you can measure stuff doesn't mean it's actually useful to look at, right? So, like, I think the digital industry as a whole has a fair bit to answer for there, because everything should do something, apparently, if you believe the hype from the marketing and ad tech industries. Like they're all measuring stuff and they're all marking their own homework, and they all think they're all responsible for all 100% of every conversion that ever happens anywhere. So, like, that's just become useless now, because there's so many tools that tell you slightly the same but slightly different stuff.
It's a nightmare.
And unfortunately, I think the mathematical literacy is low in a lot of like marketing and agency work, with no offense to the people there, because it's not core skill set stuff, but you used to rely on these tools to tell you this stuff without really interrogating whether those models actually sort of stack up to anything that's commercially sort of relevant to customers. And like we used to do it just like everybody else did. But then winding back to when I first started, we were doing loads of e-commerce and affiliate stuff, so it's actually, I didn't realize at the time, but you get a much better grounding in there, because you're always like, what's making money, basically, and then you reverse engineer from there. So we never got too sucked into the top of the funnel, if you want to put it like that, and getting all lost in attribution and trying to measure stuff like months down the line. Whereas on the business side, like, ironically or not, like, our whole approach is now trying to pull people away from that stuff and just be like, look, when you're working over a 6 or 12 or potentially 18-month sales cycle, like, the touch points that you're measuring are not, they're not conversion points, and it's the marketing stuff that's obviously the most useless.
How do you measure a dinner party conversation? Like, unless you're asking, when someone converts, how did you hear about us? And someone's like, oh, from at a dinner party. It's like, and even then people just usually say Google. Like, if you give them the option of like, how did you hear from us? Google. Like, that's usually what people say. Like, I'm sure I saw your ads somewhere, right? So it is
somewhere
interesting.
On the internet. That was
somewhere on the internet, on the line. But it is that really interesting thing of, and being a digital marketing agency, we sort of suffer from this, the want to quantify everything, and like relentless sort of ROAS and ROI of like every dollar, accountable, and where is it going, and what led to this and what led to that. But the best look is we'll measure it to a certain degree. That's kind of all we can do. And if you're comparing apples for apples consistently, it's a fairly comfortable kind of benchmark. You're like, we're confident enough in our measurement and that we know where everything is kind of going. But there is a little bit of like blind faith that is necessary in marketing and this omni-channel attribution. So you have to have a little bit of blind faith that everything that you're doing is having a positive influence, and that is just part of it. And I always think of that with billboards. It's like the only way that you can still measure classic billboards is how many cars drove past this. It's like you don't know which cars they are. You can't ask them afterwards, hey, do you remember seeing this?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
You might go, oh, we're only going to run no brand is doing this. We're not going to do any other marketing. We're only going to run billboards in this geo for this amount of time, and then we're going to see if that has a spike in orders from that region, right? That's what we used to do. And it's like, that is the only way to do it. But there is no brand that's like, I'm just going to do those billboards and see if it has an uplift. So, but there is, all the brands, we're still doing billboards, we're still doing bus ads, right? So there is still that blind faith in, no, out of home contributes to the entire ecosystem of marketing. And it's it's all important, and there are some parts that are more important and more quantifiable than others, and we have to treat it as a whole, not as, this does this and this does that, because
Yeah.
the consumer journey doesn't work that cleanly anymore. You don't just go, I have seen this ad, and then I got served this post on social, and then I got this email, and then I made the purchase. We don't operate like that anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think, I know we touched on this a bit last year, I think that's where marketing, broadly speaking, has possibly lost a fair bit of credibility over the digital era, because, the general chat, if you believe it, is exactly that, right? There's a lot of talk last year from all the big consultancies of marketers having to fight for a seat at the C-suite table, and ironically, the lack of quantifiable sort of returns from marketing, based on their research. But then I think you have to sort of also, flip side of that is, understand that marketing's kind of been under assault of being told to measure every inessential tiny thing you can measure for years and years. And as you said, probably overvaluing some aspects of that and undervaluing some others. And that has undermined the sort of value as a whole, because it destroys the confidence in the activity, I guess.
100%.
So, yeah, look, it's an interesting one. Probably a bit off topic to dive into too much further today, but I think the coming back around to content and the things you were saying about brand and the relationship to brands, I think that's where that becomes really important, because as the person or people driving that whole sort of narrative in market, if you like, that's what should be the focal point of that measurement. And there are ways to measure whether that's having an impact or not, but as you said, you shouldn't ever be trying to drill that back down to just one specific tactic or initiative, right? I mean, if it was that easy, anybody could do it.
Yeah, that's right. And you would never put all your eggs in one basket as any business, just we just do this and that's it. So why are you trying to attribute it that way?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's crazy to do that, right? So, yeah, look, it's an interesting one. And I think pulling this back around, just being conscious of time, because I do want to talk a bit about our Chief Dissent Officer role of the future for the C-suite as well. On the subject of content, Ashton, just to wrap that up a little bit, we talked, I would say, about some very valuable things there. What's your, not to put you under too much pressure, what's your sort of, let's say, 1 to 2 top things that you should be thinking about right now within, the sort of specifically the content arena? If you're a marketer, if you're a business owner, if you're anybody with some sort of a revenue type remit in your business, what should you be doing that's going to really have a big difference in the content world in your business?
Yeah, interestingly, I actually think it is investing in content as an always-on strategy. I think we went away from it for a little while, but the platforms need content. We need it more than ever. So as far as kind of content creation, production, all of that, we probably steered a little bit away. They're like, oh no, we can DIY, or AI can do it, or whatever it is. I actually just think that content almost needs to, it needs to be always on. It is not just here and we'll do it there. It's like to do marketing, you need content, and you need a lot of it, and you need it consistently. So I think about it like a factory production line, right? It's like your content should be, if you want to sell products, your content is the stuff on the production line. You need to have that production line kind of constantly working. Otherwise, if you hit the red button and stop, nothing is going out the door. You're not going to make business. You're not going to make sales. You're not going to get clients, basically. So the content production line, I think that is a really big thing. That's probably, it's one of the biggest things that I took away. And then hearing from some brands like, Meat and Livestock Australia, who spoke about the iconic Australian lamb ad, listening to Specsavers, some of these huge big brands, even Woolies. The thing really is consistency. So some of these brands, we look at them, we're like, oh my God, wouldn't it be great if we had the next should have gone to Specsavers or the next Australian lamb ad. They've committed to these creative concepts, and they have produced so much content around them for more than 20 years in both examples. So I think that is the secret sauce. It is consistency. It is absolutely sticking to it. The other big takeaway, just to finally wrap that one up, is explain it in a sentence. That came through multiple talks from really different people as well. And it came down to the distillation of you need to be able to explain a creative idea or a concept, one very simple sentence, not like a sentence with commas and ands and buts and whiches or anything like that. It needs to be super succinct. The Specsavers example was vet mistakes hat for cat. Like that's really funny. Like, you know exactly what that concept is straight away, right? So being able to distill something into one really simple idea and go, this is what we're doing. Like one little sentence. Yeah. And it wasn't just about like visual content, but about written content as well. It's like one sentence. That's it.
Yeah. I think that's a really important one actually, isn't it? Because it's those two things almost almost in opposition to each other, where you need a simple concept you can talk around forever, essentially, is what you're chasing, right?
Yeah.
I like it. Well, look, we could talk all day and all night about this stuff. So let's draw a line into the content for the moment, because I think that was a great finale / takeaway. Let me move on to the second thing that we wanted to talk about. So I know you mentioned this when we were speaking earlier in the year, the idea of a chief dissent officer. Now, just by way of a sort of short intro to this, if you haven't got the concept already from the name, obviously, Ashton, you and I agree on most things, but it is also useful to politely and constructively disagree in order to, develop our own ideas. And obviously, going back to my roots as a casual philosopher from my degree, the idea of discourse and disagreement is obviously deeply embedded in that discipline, which is how we've all not really moved that far forward mentally, in my opinion, for about 4,000 years, but that's a topic for another time. What it feels like at the moment is you can only do one of two things, and I'm going to oversimplify just to kick off this conversation. One thing you can do is you can agree, and that's the end of that chapter. The other thing you can do is vitriolically disagree, only in a very polarized and simplified fashion. And if you disagree with someone, you have to hate them forever, and you can never be friends with them, and you can never reconcile or change your mind. That, to me, is how the modern world works. What do you say to that, Ashton? How would you suggest that the chief dissent officer could assist in that scenario?
Oh my gosh, you've just tapped into our household conversation. So my husband has written an opinion column on football for around 15 plus years. So it's a very common topic in the Tuckerman household, because it's that. It's people are either staunchly with or staunchly against. Basically, how dare you say that? You should die for your opinion kind of thing. You're we're literally just talking about the lineup of this team. Should it be 4-4-2? Or it's insane. So
serious stuff.
But it's this idea of discourse and challenging, being why is it so bad to be critical, but everyone loves a food critic or a film critic, right? It's to critique is a great thing. It's we love to be challenged and be, open your perspective and be I haven't seen it that way before, or that's really interesting. Tell me more about that. We've completely lost that. There's just to the echo chambers of the internet. But I don't remember where I came up with this. I didn't come up with it, where I came across this concept of the chief dissent officer, but I love it because so at 22, myself and our head of digital, Michaela, we often have very open, healthy, mindful conflict. So it's not unusual for us to be in the open room with the team, and someone will say, we should do this. As in, I'll say, we should do this. And Michaela will say, actually, I disagree with that. And I'll go say more, go off queen. Let's, and it's very, I don't know. We just tell me more. We just, there's so much psychological safety, I think, between us and in our team, that anyone can go, no, I really disagree with that. Or why do you think that? I think the opposite. And it's very, there's nothing personal about it. And you go, let's challenge each other. And sometimes I'll go, you know what? You're right. I had not seen it from that perspective. Ignore me. My idea was terrible. Let's absolutely not do that. Or it might be the opposite of, I might convince, a little bit of a healthy debate, and go, oh, well, okay, yep, I see your thought process. Yep, cool. Let's go down that path. So I love this idea of who is the chief dissent officer in your business, right? Is there somebody who is healthily disagreeing? Because I think we've all come across these people who are like, I don't like it, I disagree. Yeah. It's like, tell me why, and it's okay to do that, but it's like, tell me why. Let's work through it. Let's workshop it, because that's where you get to the growth and the validation. And I had an amazing CMO when I was at YouFoods. His name is Adam Coward, and he used to say a line to me. He used to say, try to break it. So if there was an idea, we have an idea to do this, he'd go, great, try to break it. Basically, tell me what's wrong with this idea. Tell me how it could fail. Tell me how it could suck. Tell me who's going to hate it. And once we kind of did that pre-mortem of like, let's sort of tear it down and think about all the things that are bad about this and things that could go wrong, that would validate for us if it was, yep, we're happy with that end outcome, or we're okay with that risk, or what, we can't really tear it apart. Like it's pretty good. And that would put us on the pathway of should we do something or not do something. So yes, everyone needs a chief dissent officer in their business. That is my recommendation.
I like that. And I think the point you made is an important one as well. We're not saying that this is the, everything sucks person who just whinges and is negative all the time. This is the, constructive criticism person who, is trying to think outside the box, right?
It's like positive dissent in a way. It's like assuming positive intent, but in a very positive way. Like mindful conflict is another, label that sort of gets slapped on this from lots of, self-help books as well.
I like that. I do think there's a lot you can take from those areas, actually, because I feel like, and this leads on to sort of the first thing I want to dive into here is like, if you're in a larger organization, and obviously I work largely remotely as the rest of my team is in other states and countries, so I can't speak to this directly, as we also, I think, do this so naturally that we sort of don't even know that we're doing it now. But you with a team of sort of, more youngins around you, Ashton, like, do you feel like you guys do that now? Or is that something that everyone's comfortable doing at the moment? Beyond you and Michaela, obviously, who
maybe not, but I'm hoping that by sort of showing that example, we will get more of that. I think when you're new and when you're maybe a bit younger as well, and you're like, I'm not so sure of my opinions just yet. Like I haven't gathered enough data almost to like really back up my opinions. Like I don't know enough just yet. I think it's difficult to go, I disagree. But I am hoping that we are giving our team the tools to go to challenge and go, I'm not quite sure I'm with you on that idea. Talk me through your thinking. Say more, basically. And, to use the parlance of Gen Z, it's like you can just use that. Just go, say more. Like, tell me more about that. That's a great one for clients as well, where they're like, I think we should do this. And in your brain, you're like, that is a stupid idea. We should not do that. But you're like, I don't want to shut it down.
Like, should I say that? Should I say
that? That's the dream right now. But the ideas come from somewhere and there's context behind it. And so just say, that's my favorite trick. It's like in a, client meeting where someone's like, we should do this. I'm like, oh, tell me more, say more about that and get them talking. It's like, so where did that come from? And why do you think that? And then if you're still like in your head, I really don't think we should do this. It's like, you don't want to shut it down because, you don't want to shut creativity or ideation down. That's not helpful. I'm relentlessly helpful if nothing else. So go, I'm with you. I'm with you here, like of what you want to achieve. What if we did it this way? What would it look like if we did this? So just, I think some of those tools around, say more, tell me more. And what would it look like if we did it this way? So that's, say more and what if, that instead of going, no, I don't want to hear it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, actually. And like, to my somewhat oversimplified kind of summary of the current situation, I feel like that's the nuance that's lost in a lot of, the sort of the online discourse, right? It's like there's no room for sort of subtlety or even manners. No. Like people are just literally just at each other's throats, which that's what you're getting exposed to a lot of the time. Is not healthy for you, really.
Yeah. So I think that's a really big one. It's that the healthy, let's say challenging instead of like conflict. It's like being challenged is great, and debates are great as well. And Content Summit actually closed with a debate, which was awesome. So I think that idea really sort of permeated through. Look, we come full circle back to Content Summit. Yeah, I think that idea really permeated through. It's like,
I like it.
But it's, what a great way to end it as well, with a debate. And it's like, let's tear this apart. And we love a tear down session. That's an old agency thing as well. It's like, let's tear it down. Like, let's kind of get to the crux. And that's how we prove something has legs and has merit. That's how we might end up with a better idea. That's how we de-risk ourselves. There's just, being challenge is growth.
Totally. I completely agree with that. I think and I think to extend that thinking, you're coming back to what you were saying at the start about, the sort of the brand conversations that came out of the Content Summit, like the sort of narrative and relationship that we have both with each other and with all these concepts is exactly where that growth happens, right? Like it's, to your point around a brand being essentially a conversation between, a company and the people who perceive the company, or, in philosophical terms, it's the same thing, right? Where you've got the classic concept of the perceptual gap, where you never really perceive the real world. Well, you perceive it in a way that's not, necessarily exactly accurate in the way that it actually exists.
Yeah, it's your perception, 100%.
Exactly, yeah. And these are the things that you do all the time without realizing. But it feels like we sort of, hopefully are bringing back the the skill of having these discussions with each other in a more kind of meaningful fashion, which is why I'm trying to stay positive for this year.
Or at least we're trying. You and I are doing it. So
we're doing it, leading by example. That's the way forward,
exactly.
Right? Trying to, And I think it's the being relatively pragmatically minded as well. I always think like that. As much as it's fun having these kinds of conversations and theorizing about it, it's great when you actually get back to work. Or back to your, life, or your, football debates in your house, and see if this stuff actually plays out in reality, because that's the real litmus test, right?
Yeah, prove me wrong. I love it.
Yeah, no, that's really good. I think that's really cool. And I think I'm just conscious of time as well, Ashton. I think on the Chief Dissent Officer, I guess, just to kind of wrap that, how would you suggest, if you're sort of struggling with that, or if even worse, if you're in some sort of huge organization where you feel like, feedback is crushed under the heel of corporate structure, like what is the best way to encourage these kinds of discussions? Because you just mentioned a few easy linguistic tools, just like move discussion in a more positive direction. Is there other stuff that you would suggest is worth doing, or is it as simple as just like listening more and asking more, pointy, pertinent questions to move a conversation forward?
Yeah, asking a lot of questions is always the one. That's just ask. That's gonna it always wins. But it's really hard to change a feedback culture if you are in an environment where it's like, we don't like feedback, we don't receive it well, everyone just shut up, we don't want to hear it. Like,
we're not interested, really, guys. We know what we're doing.
It's unless you are running the business, like it's really hard to change that culture. So it kind of has to come from the top down, and it has to be embedded in the business. But if you kind of feel like you're maybe halfway there, it's like, oh, we kind of have a bit of feedback culture, sort of sometimes good, sometimes bad. I think having a little bit of fun with a healthy, fun debate is a good way to start it, to be like, oh, we can challenge each other. We've done it here, things like, does pineapple belong on pizza? Is AI art real art? Have these kind of low risk kind of challenges. That's really fun. And then if you are in a senior role or a management or leadership role, I think if you have to have a really high level of psychological trust and safety between you, but kind of modeling that for your team is really important. So, and making an effort and getting on the same page and go, hey, let's actually demonstrate this to the team a little bit, like not play acting, but, I've got this idea, I disagree with it. Go, hey, let's actually have this conversation openly so we can show the team what this looks like. And so those would be my tips.
I think those are really good, actually. And like Yeah, I would just add, I think that, obviously it's not necessarily relevant for you and I, but for bigger orgs, like the ones that I've been in that have done that really well are where they sort of encourage, to your point, those kinds of discussions at relevant levels. And then it's just knowing that the output of those conversations is actually being, listened to and actions being taken. Because to your point, if the CEO of some huge company comes down and is like, disagree with me, you're like, first day junior, you're not going to be like, you're not going to, are you? You're going to be like, this guy's in charge of the whole company, or this woman's going to, could fire me tomorrow. Whereas if they were like, oh no, well, you new guys, you go off and tell us what we could be doing better.
Yeah,
and then
you're right.
we'll
As a group, and there's safety in a group as well. Yeah, it's like instead of coming from a person, maybe band up and go, hey, as a group, this is our feedback. That kind of, there's safety in that, and safety in numbers as well.
Exactly. Herd mentality, Ashton. It's like it's not one idea. It's a
not always
collective
bad.
all of ideas. Yeah. Look, no, I think it's really important. And like, I think to your point, bringing all of this back around to the where we started on, sort of brand and content. Like these are the things I feel that bring your brand to life internally in a much more real way than like all the, no guidelines and pretty brand books and whatever are going to instill a proper sort of appreciation for working for a company and thinking it's good, other than doing stuff like this and actually bringing it to life. And, I feel like this is where there's a huge gap between a lot of brand missions and the reality is like it just doesn't come to life, right? Like it's what you, to your point, it's what you sort of see and feel and taste, right?
It's the conversations. It's all about the conversations. We're all people. We need to talk to each other.
What a perfectly relevant and timed bombshell to end on. I think that was almost if we I feel like these conversations seem a lot more planned than they actually are, which is great.
No. People should see our notes. There's like 3 things on there.
A sheet of scribbles is all I end up with, but look, that's where the magic happens, I think. So look, Ashton, thanks so much for joining again. Always a pleasure to talk to you. Even though Michaela, ditched us, but whatever. Don't need it, do we? We can do it on our own.
Someone's got to do the work.
Exactly. What before we go, what's on the agenda for you and the gang at 22 over the next few months? Like what's happening? You've got your own podcast coming, right? Like what else should we be?
The podcast is out there. Yeah, we're doing our financial year planning, which is really fun. I actually have a group of students from UQ Marketing and Advertising Society waiting out here at the moment. So hopefully I'll get to hop in and say hi and bye to them. But yeah, watch this space. The podcast is the big one. So yeah, please do. It's called Catch 22. Great name. I would say open to a lot of feedback. We are open to your feedback, but be kind, because we know it's a little bit rough around the edges. We are, the grunge, right? It's like, it's a little bit grungy. We love it. Yeah. Done is better than perfect.
Awesome. I'm proud of you guys for just getting it done and getting started. That's the biggest hurdle to get over. So I'll chuck a link to it under this episode. And look, I still, despite many promises, haven't thought of a good ending to any of the shows. So this is the end of the show. See you next time.
Catch 22, we'd say catch you later.
Catch you later.
Thanks, Stu. See ya.